So this is Saturday, October 4th, 2014, and today we'll return as kind of a preparation for our Jataka session coming up in Vermont, just to kind of set the tone. We'll return to a Jataka tale, perhaps the most famous classic Jataka of all, which is the Jataka of the Tigress. And for this teisho, I'll use the book I wrote, Endless Path, Awakening Within the Buddhist Imagination, Jataka Tales, Zen Practice, and Daily Life. And the Tigress Jataka is really something quite extraordinary and difficult in many ways. The Dalai Lama before this one, the 13th Dalai Lama, the current is the 14th, used to comment on a Jataka tale every year at the annual, I think it was a New Year's festival in Tibet. And this is pre-communist Tibet, when all their structures were up and running, not compromised. And every year he would comment on the same Jataka. He never changed it. Every year he did his teisho on one Jataka tale, and that was the Jataka of the Tigress. He felt the 13th Dalai Lama, who was a great administrator, great leader, and great teacher, felt that the Tigress Jataka, while it was brief, kind of encapsulated everything of what the Buddhist path is about. There are, I think I'll mention in the talk, in the teisho, there are some extraordinary images of the Tigress Jataka. One is at Horyuji, an important temple in Japan, but the other goes all the way back to the Dunhuang caves of China. I'm trying to remember what the years were for the Dunhuang caves. I'm drawing a blank, so somewhere between 500 and 800, I guess, AD in China. There's paintings of the scene from the Tigress, as we'll see as its drama unfolds. So here's the story, and then we'll get to a commentary on it as well. Yeah, if you can up that, thanks. Yeah, that's better, thank you. Long ago, really ages before the Bodhisattva attained perfect enlightenment and became the Buddha of our world age, known as Shakyamuni, that is the sage of the Shakya clan, he was born into a family of wealthy Brahmins in this long ago past life. He grew up learning the wisdom, rituals, and skills of his station. When he was grown, he was honored. Nobles saw that he had the bearing of a king. The wise looked up to him as a sage. Warriors and merchants felt he had the wisdom of a leader. He was also a naturally gifted teacher, drawn to guiding others along a path of selfless generosity, which in time he decided was his true calling. So he left the city for the forest, where he established a hermitage for those seeking to enter the higher life. One day, years later, now a teacher, he was walking in the forest with one of his disciples. It had not rained for some weeks. The trees were bare, the grass brittle, and the stream beds nearly dry. Suddenly they heard a series of coughing roars coming from somewhere very close nearby. The student listened and said, "Master, those are the roars of a tiger, a hungry tiger. We'd better go back now." But the teacher said, "Wait a moment, listen again. Those are not simply the roars of a hungry tiger. They are the roars of a starving one. Let us go on a bit further and see if there's anything we might do to help." Reluctantly, the disciple agreed. In a short time they came to the edge of a cliff. Looking down, they saw what was clearly a starving tiger. A tigress, actually, for two small cubs were trying to nurse from her. But every time they approached, the tigress roared miserably and drove her two cubs away. She was emaciated, just skin and bones, with all her ribs plainly showing. When she looked at her cubs, her eyes narrowed and seemed to glaze over. It was clear to the Bodhisattva that in her desperation she had now begun to view them, her own children, as prey, as meat. Quick, said the Bodhisattva to his student, run and see if you can find some food for this starving animal. She may be driven to eat her own cubs if she doesn't have food soon. The karma arising from that will be terrible. I'll wait here and do what I can to stop her from harming her cubs till you return. The disciple ran off. The teacher watched him go, then turned back to watch the tigers below. How pitiful, he thought, watching them. Even as the Bodhisattva watched, he saw the starving tigress struggle to rise up on her front legs, hindquarters still on the ground. She tried again and again. At last she managed to rise and, growling and drooling, tottered unsteadily toward her tiny cubs. My disciple is not going to be back with food in time to stop her now, thought the Bodhisattva. But I can't just stand idly by and let this happen. Mind is vast, totally empty, cannot be found. This body, so much matter, is the crystallization of my own past thoughts and deeds, extending back into the endless past. My deepest wish has ever been to save sentient beings. To fail to act when there is opportunity would only be a cause for regret. He removed his robe and hung it on a branch of the tree. Then, like a man preparing to simply dive into a lake, he put his hands together and leapt from the cliff. Startled by the sound of something crashing through the trees and bushes behind her, the tigress crouched down in fear, then turned to look, and saw the bloodied body of a man stretched out on the rocks at the base of the cliff. Gathering her remaining strength, she lunged forward and began to feed. When the disciple returned, apologetic and empty-handed, he saw the teacher's robe hanging on the tree at the cliff's edge. He called the teacher's name. There was no response. Fearing the worst, he went forward and looked down over the cliff's edge and saw the tigress feeding. With a cry, the disciple threw himself to the ground by the base of the tree and wept. At last he rose, dried his eyes, and in awe carried the robe as a sacred relic back to the hermitage. Once there, he told the tale of their teacher's sacrifice to the other disciples. Then he led them all back to the spot. There they festooned the tree with garlands of flowers. When the tigress and her cubs departed, the disciples all descended the cliff, gathered the Bodhisattva's bones, and built a jeweled stupa in which to house them. The gods, stunned themselves by what they'd witnessed, descended to earth, where the Bodhisattva's body had been devoured and his blood shed, and covered the ground with precious incense, fine sandalwood powder, and heavenly perfumes. Even now, the Bodhisattva's deed is remembered by those very gods, and by humans too who know the tale. It will never be forgotten, even as long ages pass in which high mountains and great civilizations rise and fall, never to be heard of again. So that's the story of the tigress. Simple, direct, and very powerful Jataka tale. So now to comment on it. There are all kinds of stories in the more than 500 Jataka tales, heroic ones, foolish ones, silly, sad, dumbfounding, horrifying, awe-inspiring, and inspiring ones. There are a vast number in which the Buddha, as the Bodhisattva in past life, that is the Buddha in past life, is an animal, many in which he is a human being in both very high and very low stations in life. some where he's a god or spirit, some where he is foolish and has to learn a lesson. All are about wisdom, both transcendental, profound, selfless, non-dual prajna wisdom, which is itself compassion, as well as practical, worldly wisdom of the sort that knows how to manage a career or turn a dime into a dollar. The Jatakas are also about compassion, ranging from simple concern and kindness to very deep, non-dual, selfless compassion, which is in reality the only wisdom. Essentially, the Jatakas demonstrate the Bodhisattva on the endless path of mastering the perfections, or paramitas: generosity, morality, patient forbearance, vigor, meditative practice, wisdom, and the four additional ones: skillful means, or liberative technique, resolve, strength or fortitude, and knowledge. Still, the Tigress is unique. This one is the first in Aryashura's famous Jataka Mala from around 400 AD, a Mahayana inspirational text. Jataka Mala means garland or rosary. It contained of Jatakas. Mala is rosary. Jataka, is obviously the stories, Jataka Mala, rosary or garland of Jatakas. It contained 34 Jatakas and is a work meant to inspire our own bodhisattva mind to awake and act for good in our lives and in the lives of others. I'd like to comment on this Jataka, but I'm uneasy. It's profound and it's famous, and it's about dana. So clearly, dana means selfless generosity. Selfless generosity. And that is the core of all of the paramitas, selfless generosity. Dogen says that dana releases birds to the air and flowers to the springtime. Dana, so beyond the self. To really release everything is to release birds to the air and flowers to the springtime, which means releasing snow to the winter and autumn colors to the fall. This is a profound non-dual position that Dogen takes. In Japan, at Horyuji Temple, there is a gorgeous 7th century painted wood portable altar shrine, the Tamamushi Shrine, depicting this scene: the Buddha as a bodhisattva hanging his robe on a tree and leaping from the cliff to feed the starving tigress and her cubs. It is, as I've mentioned, also painted on the wall of the Dunhuang caves, begun in the 4th century in Buddhist China, and is depicted at the 5th or 6th century Bodhnath Stupa in Kathmandu, Nepal, as well. As I said, I'd like to comment, but I don't really feel capable. I think we're on our own with this one. Each of us alone, facing the sheer cliff of total, uncompromising, unmediated compassion, watching in awe as the Bodhisattva makes his straightforward, courageous, unrationalized, wouldn't you reason yourself out of actually completing such an outrageous, self-destructive act? His courageous way through this saha, as it's called in Buddhist tradition, or bearable world, or tolerable world. Our world in which so many painful things happen. Tigers starve. People starve. We all wish we could do something. The news is so appalling. We all deeply wish we could do something. This bearable world. In Buddhist tradition, our world, one of many, as the Buddhist texts say, is not so overwhelmingly joyous that we drift into an endless party and never take up the great task of working on ourselves and developing compassion for suffering beings, seeing no need for such exertions. Nor is it so overwhelmingly horrible or crushingly destructive that we can't begin, can't even hope that there's actually an eightfold path through which we might evolve to happiness and freedom. But how do we work this one out? How do we work with it? I feel I can comment on Jatakas where the Buddha knows stuff, like how to be helpful, or how to turn a profit, or how to shoot an arrow to win his way. There are Jatakas like that. And on Jatakas where he fails and makes mistakes and tries again. That I can certainly talk about. But this, the only response I know to this Jataka is silence. Stunned silence. Awed silence. The curtain comes down on the mystery. What can be said? Contemplate it. Muse on it. A man leaps from a cliff to feed a starving tigress with his own body. Period. That's it. The most honest comment I've seen on the Tigress Jataka comes from our Zen elder, Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, environmentalist, beat movement founder, and Jack Kerouac's idol and real-life model for Jaffe Ryder and Dharma Bums, Gary Snyder. If you don't know Gary's work, read Rip Rap and Cold Mountain Poems. Read his terrific books of essays like The Practice of the Wild and his finally completed long poem series, Mountains and Rivers Without End. And be glad we've still got him around. Gary writes a brief statement in his Myths and Texts, an early book of his, very small book, that goes like this. Buddha fed himself to tigers and donated mountains of eyes through the years to the blind. A mountain lion once trailed me 4 miles at night and no gun. It was awful. I didn't want to be ate. Maybe we'll change. That's from Hunting 14 in Myths and Texts. That's the section. So maybe I can comment on this commentary. Gary Snyder presents the ideal and the actual side by side as if equal. The Buddha's example leads us on, inspires us, sets models of selflessness in our minds, and awakens archetypes of Buddhist behavior. But if we're honest, we know that by simply identifying with the Buddha and taking him as our model, we don't thereby become him, even like him. We're still going to find a vast distance between his spontaneous actions and our own. A mountain lion once trailed me 4 miles at night and no gun, and it was awful. Maybe we'll change. We can't, his actions on our own. We can't feed a tigress. We're scared to just walk down a forest path, scared of lions and tigers and bears, oh my. We're likely to think, that mountain lion looks pretty healthy. No need to give it a thing, let alone my precious body. Or I'll call animal control or the ASPCA and have them check it out and send them a donation. Still, just having this model, this image of compassion in action, rouses something in us, awakens something, some desire to bridge the gap, some recognition of humility and the encouragement to undertake the work necessary to be like the Buddha and to realize what is best, deepest, and truest in ourselves. There is that hope, the hope that is also a necessity. Maybe we'll change. A humbling and very honest recognition, which is where our own practice begins, must begin. Knowing the length and difficulty of the road, we still come courageously forward each day and make our 4 bodhisattva vows. Vows for all beings. The many beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Greed, hatred, and ignorance rise endlessly. I vow to abandon them. Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed. I vow to embody it fully. For we recognize a need. Maybe we'll change. So we go to the Zendo, attend sesshin, take up our own practice realization of daily life and the paramitas. Bit by bit, we start to feed ourselves to a starving tiger. On the job, in the home, moment by moment, selfless giving begins. Maybe it's only a vague and distant ideal to start with, but generosity itself is a life path, one we can begin where we are, as we are. The journey of 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles begins with a first step, no matter how small, how tentative that step might be, one foot after another. Huan Wu, in commenting on case 96 of Hekigonoku, Zhao Chu's three turning words, turns to the Jatakas, specifically to the tales of the Tigress and to the Bodhisattva's meeting with Dipankara Buddha in a past life. That Jataka appears in the opening of my book, The Hungry Tigress. Very interesting Jataka set many world ages in the past, where the Bodhisattva actually meets the Buddha of the previous world age, Dipankara Buddha. So Huan Wu turns to these Jatakas as a source of fierce encouragement, and we see the model. He uses the model of the Bodhisattva in the Jatakas in his Zen presentation in Hekigan-roku. Wei Ke, who would later become Bodhidharma's great disciple when severely rebuffed by Bodhidharma in Huan Wu's commentary, in his first attempt to receive teaching, pondered as reimagined by Huan Wu. Nobody knows if he ever thought this, but this is Huan Wu being the literary agent, writer, imagining the thoughts that might be going through Wei Ke's mind as he stands in the snow, beseeching Bodhidharma for Dharma teaching. When people of ancient times sought the way, they broke their bones and took out the marrow, shed their blood to appease hunger, spread their hair to cover mud, threw themselves off cliffs to feed tigers. Even of old they were like this. What about me? What about me? Each of those points that Huan Wu has Wei Ke imagine as he stands in the snow are Jataka tales. Breaking the bones and taking out the marrow. The Bodhisattva did that in a Jataka to feed a demon, an ogre, who had actually high wisdom teachings. And so in exchange, he broke his own bones. This is an image of very severe practice, of giving it everything you've got. We might not need to take it literally, though who knows in the depths of time what people did. I have no idea. Shed their blood to appease hunger. Yes, the Bodhisattva did that. Cut a vein, gave blood to starving animals in past life Jatakas. Horrifying. Spread their hair to cover mud. This is what the Bodhisattva does when meeting the great Buddha, Dipankara. He's a sage then, and he's been asked to fill in some muddy ground in preparation for the great Buddha's arriving in that world age, coming to a certain city. The Bodhisattva has flown through the air down from the Himalayas, and he sees the Buddha approaching, and there's still a patch of muddy ground he hasn't covered. And so he takes his long hair, like a sage would have in ancient times, and bent down and spread his own hair on the mud for the Buddha to walk on, an act of deep selflessness and egolessness, like Sir Walter Raleigh spreading his cloak on the ground for the Queen to walk and not touch muddy ground. Threw themselves off cliffs to tigers. Well, that's clear enough. We just read that, Jataka. Even of old they were like this. What about me? So the images from those Jatakas have gone deep into Wei Ke's mind. As he stands there in the snow, being rebuffed by Bodhidharma, he could turn away, he could go back down the mountain, he could go get some shelter and a hot cup of soup. But he thinks, what about me? And he doesn't leave. He stands there as the snow piles up around his knees and up around his waist. The bitterness only gets worse. Yeah. Thinking like this, encouraging himself with Jataka tales, the die is cast, and Wei Ke will not turn away. He'll take a leap into totally committed practice effort. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the pilot, writer, and author of The Little Prince, was told by the French government to stop flying reconnaissance missions in World War II. It was too dangerous. He was needed as a writer. He was a national treasure. He replied that he was a pilot and he would fly. He died on such a mission. You can read his superb book, Flight to Arras, which details the certitude of his own death on one such mission, about why he chose to give himself to the Tigress of his time. Here's a quote Saint-Exupéry left for us from his vision of a selfless life. What saves a man, we can say a person, is to take a step, then another step. It is always the same step, but you have to take it. That's in Wind, Sand, and Stars by Saint-Exupéry. It won't do to think about it. It won't do to imagine it. It's the same step of practice each time we touch the mat. Each breath. It won't do to think, I did it. It's the same step, but we have to take it. Again and again and again and again and again and again. It is always the same step, but we have to take it. Giving breath to our ideal life by counting the breath clearly. 1, 2, 3. Giving space to the mind by sitting and letting everything else go. Taking up our koan, committing completely to becoming that point. Letting birdsong enter and transform us. Letting the crows say it, caw, caw. Letting cold pierce us and heat kill us. Wiping away everything we may be clinging to in our heads. Not ready to jump off cliffs, give eyes, bodies, heads, maybe not even imagining we might one day even want to do any such things. We sit, take up the practice, follow this breath. Let go of this thought. Maybe we step out again after that sitting a little lighter, a little steadier, a little happier, a little less heavily there, a bit more present here, and so a bit more capable of just a little more spontaneous kindness and generosity. By being less here, we become capable of doing so much more here. In the literal moment of this Jataka, there is, of course, an implicit challenge to the Bodhisattva and to us. If a bunny was down at the bottom of the cliff and a tiger was about to eat it, we'd probably all say, jump down, great being, and save that cute little bunny. But it's not a bunny. It's a horrible, flesh-rending, dangerous beast. The most dangerous animal in the jungle at that time. A tiger. And this one is particularly horrible. It is drooling and ugly and in a murderously freaky state of mind, about to commit a horrifying deed, about to create its own hellish karma by devouring its own children. Can the Bodhisattva's love be great enough to enfold even this horrifying and dangerous, fang-clawed, monstrously awful being? Yes, it can. The story is not just about a leap. It is about love. Where do we stand with this? How about with something as ordinary as drinking tea or eating a bagel? Can we take off our robe of accomplished identity, momentarily drop whatever lofty station we may be clinging to in our heads, let the inner dialogue go, and just drink this tea? Just eat this bagel. Really see each thing, taste each thing, feel the texture, the hot and cold. Hear the sounds of the birds outside the window. Just be it all. Just leap from the cliff, even for a brief moment or two. There are many such opportunities in each day. Or how about in a struggle at home, in a fight with a partner or a teenage child or spouse? Can we take off our robe and leap from the top of our cliff, opening ourselves to the claws and fangs that await? Lose ourselves in our habitually safe vantage, get chewed up, eaten up, and really listen. Maybe even perhaps get their point of view and agree there might be some truth in what they say. There is a truly ancient and very modern perception lying beneath this. The Bodhisattva's love sets him searching for meat for the starving tigress to save her and her cubs. Where is meat? Where? Wait! I am meat. I am food. I might not just be of service, I can be served. I am the meal. I am in the food chain. This is a very humbling perception to the predator. We are just meat. Some years ago, when our daughter Aria lived in Missoula, Montana, she was walking with a friend in a forest. They had a chocolate lab puppy with them. The puppy sniffed and gambled. They talked and walked and passed many people, then got out beyond where others were hiking. Suddenly they noticed how quiet it was. They looked around and saw a mountain lion was stalking them. It stalked them for 10 terrifying minutes, and for those 10 minutes they were just meat. Eventually other people, hikers and runners, came along and made one big body with many heads and arms, and the lion vanished. If you want to know what that might be like, walk alone in the woods at night sometime. You'll be amazed at how much of that old fear of just being meat will spring out of the shadows and stalk you. Night terrors arise, going back perhaps in our psyches to a time when darkness meant truly fierce predators, and we were simply prey. Forget your degrees, your state of practice, your lofty accomplishments, your hopes, wishes, dreams, and noble aspirations. Meat. I was trailed 4 miles at night and no gun. It was awful. And yet, isn't this recognition, I am meat, I am food, all about love? Jesus said, this is my body. Come and eat. It is the foundation of the Catholic Mass. What I have to give is myself. Somewhere in the Hindu Vedas, I believe, is a very ancient chant that is the essence of a profound liberation, a total giving up and letting go. I am food. I am food. I am food. I am an offering, that is. I am the sacrifice given willingly to all beings. And after death, I will be consumed by bugs and worms and ants and microbes and re-enter the food chain. I am food then really means that I am eternal, endless, and that the universe itself is my living body. And it equally means that I am nothing at all in myself, only something to be used, only here to bring nourishment to others. Well, maybe one day we don't hold back and finally just leap from the top of our lofty, isolated, perhaps hard-won vantage on the cliff and get totally eaten by a tigress. Just like that. Swallowed and gone. It could happen in the Zendo, or while taking a walk, eating a meal, talking to a friend, making a phone call, anywhere. Gone. Gone. Entirely gone. As the Prajna Paramita says, a liberating moment, a peak experience, a milestone. But we don't live on peaks. We get our feet back down on the ground. And then our real work begins. Zazen, Doksan, Teisho, precepts, paramitas, sesshin. It's the same step. But you have to take it. The Tigress Jataka dramatizes noble giving, dana, the essential paramita or perfection of endless, limitless generosity, the giving up of self that releases birds to the air, flowers to the springtime, and once again unfolds that brocade of glittering stars across the vast night sky. If we don't give up the self, we never really see the birds flying. We never really hear their calls. We never really see the stars spread across the night sky. Maybe we poke our head out and we say, oh, the stars are out. And then we go back to our TV show. Giving up the self is how we enter the world for real, the world that's always been here. We can be on a hike, out in nature, be so lost in our heads we never really see, we never really feel. Giving up the self is to return the birds to the sky, the flowers to the springtime. Dogen is making a most ordinary, most transparent, most clear statement. Our practice is about giving up the self. Giving up the self is like feeding the self to an always hungry tigress. Gone into this moment, this smell of incense, this pain in my knee, this breath, this count, this koan point. Everything can be the tigress, taking all our separation away. That's the point. It is only in giving away our eyes and heads that we begin to see. It is only in giving up our bodies that we begin to feel. The Tigress Jataka dramatizes and perfects that perfection too, takes it to the limit in one fell swoop. But lifetimes of small steps, small leaps, lie behind and before it. And even more come after. The Buddha too only gets there, one step at a time. And it's said that even he's still only halfway there.